What happens if you're not happy with the K-12 education system? What are parents supposed to do? Typically across Canada, parents only have 3 options: government-run public schools, private schools, or homeschooling. But in Alberta, they're trailblazing a 4th option: charter schools, which are publicly funded schools run by nonprofits instead of the government. Albertan parents can access these schools free of tuition. Today, we're going to look at a charter school in Alberta to learn more. Earlier this year, secondstreet.org polled Canadians on whether they thought the public education system was going in the right direction. And the results were astounding. 55% said it was going in the wrong direction, while only 25% said right direction. The rest said they didn't know. The majority of Canadians are unhappy with the status quo, but the majority of people can't afford to send their kids to private school or to take a pay cut and homeschool. We went to Alberta to check out Calgary Classical Academy and spoke with founder Kaylin Ford and associate principal Liam Hertzsprung.
The charter schools are public tuition-free schools, and they're open to all of the students who live in the geographic area. So in our case, that means the cities of Calgary and Edmonton. So our student population is extremely diverse in terms of the linguistic, socioeconomic background of the students, their religion, their creed, ethnicity. So you'll see that reflected in our hallways. But I think that they're united together by this really sort of shared pursuit of wisdom and friendship.
Charter schools are like the free market a little bit more in education, not in the terms of a private school where you have to pay, but I like to give the example of a coffee shop. So I like to think of the CBE as Tim Hortons, and then the Catholic board might be Starbucks. And imagine if the government were saying that you can only choose between Tim Hortons and Starbucks. But what if there's, a different local brewery that's making great coffee? Isn't it absurd to say that they can't sell their coffee and that people can't buy their coffee? In Calgary, we have some coffee shops, Rosso or Monogram. I like to think of us as one of those.
So in terms of what differentiates our program in the delivery of our curriculum, as a charter school, we adhere to all of the same learning outcomes that other public schools do. So this is outlined in the Alberta government's programs of study, but we deliver that curriculum in a distinct way. They study English, they also study Latin, grammar and etymology, and that's a big help in allowing them to acquire mastery of the English language. They do sort of traditional things like sentence diagramming. I could take you to a grade 4 class and they could recite for you all of the rules of grammar and they could go on for 20 minutes. Things that I didn't even ever formally learn. This really greatly enhances their mastery and their command of the language. They also study classic literature. So we have a great books program at our school. We have a prescribed list of sort of classic, enduring texts from throughout history that our students read in each year. There's also a list of poems that they will memorize every year.
As soon as I graduated with my Bachelor of Education, I started working for the Calgary Board of Education, which is the main public board in Calgary. And I worked there for 7 years. I started here last year as a music teacher, and I assumed the associate principal role in January. There are a few major differences. One of them would be the standards that we hold for our students. I've noticed in Calgary Classical Academy, the standards are a lot higher than what we have for the public system. Where I was in the public system, it was common to reach down to the lowest performing student to accommodate them, and in so doing, we would bring everybody else down around us. At this school, we aim higher, and we actually bring lower performing students up. This is something that's often said in education, and we know it to be true that we should hold higher standards and students will rise to the standards that we hold. But for whatever reason, it doesn't happen in the public system that I've seen.
When we polled Canadians on public education, their number 1 concern was the lack of discipline and accountability in the public system. 63% of respondents said it was going in the wrong direction, while only 17% said right direction. So it begs the question, are charter schools doing any better on this front?
We run a bit of a tighter ship here than you'll see in the public system. Some things that are not frowned upon in the public system would be a more serious grievance here, like foul or profane language. That's actually a level 2 infraction here, which would merit at least an email home and perhaps a detention. If we hear a student using swear words repeatedly, we would be talking about a at-home suspension. I remember a teacher that I worked with at my old school was somewhat bemused when her school for her child called and said that her grade 1 child was using the F word, to which she responded, "So what? It's just a word." But we know that we don't want our students to be using these words, and so that's an example of something that we would hold students to a higher standard. When I talk about a higher standard in terms of academics, I also am talking about a higher standard in terms of discipline as well.
We have a very different approach to discipline than what you would find in a lot of other public schools. We actually think that children thrive when they have an environment where there's clear expectations, where there are high expectations for them. They take pride in being able to sort of see that bar and to meet it consistently. And they thrive when there's actually sort of order and structure in their lives and their day. We think that that's actually sort of training their souls for the exercise of freedom so that they're qualified for this meaningfully as they get older, and they're not ruled by their passions and they're not a slave to their passions.
Calgary Classical Academy is very popular and has a very long wait list. There is also good evidence that charter schools have helped to drive change and innovation in the public school system.
Part of the reason that Alberta introduced charter schools was the idea that they could help drive research and innovation in the broader public system. And I think in certain ways that has happened, sometimes in unexpected ways. One of Alberta's oldest charter schools is Foundations for the Future. They wear uniforms, they use more traditional pedagogical methods. They became enormously popular. They achieved very, very good academic results. They had a waiting list of like 14,000 students, I think, at one point. So the public boards started emulating them. They developed traditional learning centers that tried mimicking the pedagogical approach of Foundations for the Future. And now those schools all have massive waiting lists. Similarly, an arts academy was opened in Calgary, and I think the public system has followed suit. There's a girls' charter school, and after that was launched, the public system opened up an all-girls school. So in that way, too, charters can also signal where there is a sort of, again, market demand, and that can also drive the public system to say, oh, maybe there's something to this idea. Maybe we should do this as well.
So what do you think? Should other provinces consider charter schools? Would you like to see a school like Calgary Classical Academy open up in your city or your hometown? While this charter school focuses on classical topics, other charter schools in Alberta have different focuses. For example, math and sciences, music, living off the land, and others.
If you're curious about charter schools and if you're somewhat skeptical of the education that your child is receiving right now, you aren't alone. If there's a bit of a disconnect between what you see in your students and maybe their marks at school, or if you're just feeling a little like you're kept in the dark from the school, I would say take a look at charter schools because they're a wonderful option. So I would say to people in other provinces, write your MLA. Ask them what you can do to make charter schools a reality in your province.
Considering the recent polling that the majority of Canadians are unhappy with the direction of public education, provinces across the country can look at the Alberta charter school model and consider implementing it. After all, the education of Canada's children and future leaders is what's at stake.
We try to expose them to sort of the best that has been thought and said across time, because we believe that we're standing on the shoulders of giants and we are the heirs of a civilizational inheritance. And we want our students to be able to receive that and also to be qualified to transmit it to the next generation as well.
To learn more about education reform, visit secondstreet.org and don't forget to hit that subscribe button.